if you think about your normal public podcast, you think about great shows like this one, right? You're interviewing people, you're having great conversations. And private podcasts are different in the sense that they look and feel just like a normal public podcast. You can play them on your favorite podcast app that you're probably listening to this one on as well. But as the owner, as the creator, you get to control who gets access to that content and for how long. So you have all of this amazing convenience of being able to turn off that phone screen, get some screen-free time, put it in your pocket, do whatever it is you're doing, go about your day, and you're consuming this amazing content. And now you're not just kind of limited to public content. You're now able to listen to and consume this premium content that was either gated through an opt-in or gated through a paid, whether, as a paid course or a premium service. But that, to me, that's the game changer. And that's how we started getting into podcasting.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, you just answered 4 of my questions.
Oh,
so
awesome.
We can go home
I
now.
can elaborate. No, I can give more detail too. Well, overachiever. No,
it's okay.
But the cool part, I will say this, there's a few more differences because I'm guessing one of the big questions that everyone has is what's the difference between a public podcast and a private podcast? And
yes,
so we talked a little bit about the difference in terms of being able to control. I will say there's 2 more differences that everyone should know about. One is the delivery of content. So in public podcasts just like this, content is pushed on a date driven. So this episode is dropping on a very specific date, and it's dropping for everyone who's subscribed to this podcast. It's date driven. And you can do that content delivery method in private podcasts. You can have your episodes being delivered for everyone on a specific date. You can also choose to have an instant feed where all of your content is there at the same time. That's great for courses or for things that have a very defined container and you want people to kind of Netflix or binge it, right, as they go. The really cool part about private podcasts is you can also create a dripped feed. So I can actually, and it could be listener specific. So I could actually release something on day 1, and that day 1 is whenever that individual opted in or was granted access to that private feed. And that, if you wanted to opt in next week, your day 1 would be next week. If I opted in today, my day 1 would be today. And we're both listening to the same podcast, the same private podcast, but we're on individual schedules, which is actually very interesting for like evergreen challenges or evergreen launch material or things like that, which is different. The other, I think the big difference between private podcasts, which is something you can't do with public podcasts, and that's listener specific content. So in a private podcast, access is actually tied to that listener's specific email address. So when that listener activates that feed, loads it in their app, we know exactly when they're listening and what episodes they're listening to because it's tied to that email address. So we have very granular analytics that we don't get with public podcasts. And now based on what they're listening to, we can take actions. So if they downloaded your webinar episode, so you created a podcast version of your webinar, now we know that their awareness level in your marketing funnel is a little higher. So you might choose to take a different action or follow up with them with a different email than you would have for someone that did not listen or consume that episode. Not only can you do that, you can tag. So now we're getting into a little bit of like audio CRM land.
Sure,
you can tag listeners. So if I have buyers and non-buyers who are listening to the same feed, I can actually slip episodes or slip dynamic content in per listener that is relevant for them. So for my non-buyers, I might send a promo or I might send testimonials related to the course that I want them to buy. And for my buyers, I might slip them a bonus episode or something specific. So now not only is it just being able to create the convenience of listening on the go, now private podcasts enable you to really be more relevant with the content that you're dropping per listener, which is something that public podcasts can't do. So those are probably the biggest differences between public and private feeds.